I was thinking about childhood fears a couple of days ago. When I was young, I had like a huge fear of tornadoes. Anybody else? Like I grew up in the Midwest. Not like in Tornado Alley, like Wisconsin, we get a few tornadoes, not like Kansas we get. But I was thinking about that, and I developed this fear because my older cousin, locked me in the back of his truck. They had like an enclosed cab, and was like, "Hey, there's a tornado coming." It was like a beautiful sunny day, and I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Bye, see ya." And I was in there for like a half an hour before my parents came out. And we're like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "There's a tornado in the basement. I'm already dead." And like every day after that, if it was overcast or a little bit cloudy, like I became obsessed with the Weather Channel. Like that was my favorite network. I was in 2nd grade. I loved the Weather Channel. I knew all the meteorologists by name. One of my most exciting moments, like as a kid, was going to see the holiday parade because the news team for ABC News was going to be there. But John Chandic, I still remember the guy's name, was in the parade. He was the chief meteorologist, and I like yelled out to him, like you see this celebrity. Like I was on the side, I was like, "John Chandic!" And my dad's like, "What is your problem?" I was like, "That's John Chandic, man. He like controls the weather." I had a skewed vision of how weather worked, but I had this fear. It was just crippling. Where I would get so anxious to go to school if like there was rain or a possibility of storms because I didn't want to be at school if there was a tornado. I just didn't buy into the whole crouch in the hallway and put your hands behind your neck. That was going to save anybody. I just didn't feel that was going to be okay. It's just not going to do anything. I mean, I had this silly childhood fear of storms. Maybe had a similar fear. I also went through a period of my life where I was really afraid of mad cow disease. It was like a thing when I was younger, like in the news, there's E. coli and mad cow breakouts. And I was like, I'm done with McDonald's burgers today. That's it. And so I was vegetarian for a while, like when I was young, because I was so convinced that eating any kind of meat would give me mad cow disease, and my parents were probably like, "What is this kid's deal?" And, so we go. It was great because I was a little bit bigger as a child, and so I lost a lot of weight that way. Like we'd go out to eat, and we could be at McDonald's, and they'd be like, "Hey, what do you want to eat?" And like a side salad, please. And so eventually I started eating meat again because McDonald's broke me. I saw an advertisement for a Big Mac, and I was like, "Yeah, I want that." Something inside of me says that that's right now, so we'll go with that. I had all these different fears as a kid, and maybe you had some too. My dad always used to say, he had one saying, he'd quote Franklin Delano Roosevelt, maybe you know what I'm going to say. He'd look at me when I was afraid to go to school, or afraid to eat a cheeseburger, or afraid of anything. I was afraid of a lot of things. Those were like the major fears that marked my childhood, but those, there were lots of little things I was just scared about. So the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That's it. It's the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. This was never comforting to me. It never made me feel any better, but he would say it over and over again. A couple of years ago, I was getting on a flight from Phoenix to Philadelphia with my wife, and I had flown several times before this. And getting on the flight, we were flying out of Phoenix from a convention that we both attended, and we were going to go back to Philadelphia and be with her family. I was going to ask her dad on that trip if I could marry her. That was like the big trip, which was exciting for a couple of reasons. I had only met her dad one other time, and I had planned to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage on Father's Day. I thought this was a winning combination, it makes sense. All of my friends were like, "Why would you do that?" I'm like, "He's got to say yes. He's known me for a week, and it's Father's Day, right? It makes sense. I'll kind of corner him." So we're taking off in Phoenix, and what I know about Phoenix now that I didn't know is that Phoenix has some unique atmospheric features, some weather features, which being a weather guru myself for my childhood, I should have understood. But if you're landing into Denver, you have mountain wave turbulence because of the mountains. If you're landing in Phoenix in the summertime, you have convective turbulence, which is essentially plumes of hot air that will kind of rise up. And landing and taking off can be pretty bumpy if you aren't, and it can be scary if you don't know what's going on. So the plane takes off, and my wife gets very motion sick. And so she's holding my hand because she doesn't want to throw up on the seat in front of her, which I thought was very nice for the person in front of her. And as we're taking off, we hit kind of a wave of convective turbulence, and so the plane kind of rose up, and then it sank. And it was just weird because we were taking off, and so the engines, like the pilot, if the pilot could floor it, I like to imagine they've got like an accelerator up there. I know that's not how it works, but it just is more visually pleasing to me that they're in like a NASCAR. And as we sank, they upped the throttle so that we would, not crash and die into the ground. Normal stuff. But just the cycling of the engine, because it was like, and like the sinking of the plane, and like my wife squeezed my hand, and all of my notions and all the things I told myself about flying, it's so safe, it's super safe, culminated in this one moment where I was like, I have literally no control over this giant piece of metal. We're all going to die. like something just snapped in me, and the rest of the flight was awful. I just was like so anxious, and all of this, like the fearful boy kind of came back. And from that moment, for about the next 2 years, I had a crippling fear of flight. Like I would not the kind of like, ooh, I'm really scared, so like I'm gonna, I'll remedy that with just a couple shots before the flight and we'll be okay. Or like, hey, I'll take some Xanax and I'll be fine. Like I would step, like get through security and be like, yep, nope, we're done. Not getting on that metal death trap today. Because it has the number, like I couldn't do it. I'm like, today's the day I'm gonna die. And this fear of flying like completely crippled what I was and wasn't able to do. Like I missed a bachelor party that I was had in Philadelphia because I don't want to fly to Philadelphia. I missed a staff retreat because I was like, I don't want to fly to Florida. I missed different trips that I could have taken. And I always elected to drive, justifying it. Like, well, it's you get to see the country. Who doesn't want to see, Nebraska? So much corn. It's amazing. And so one day my wife looked at me and was very honest and essentially said, you have nothing to fear but fear itself, but put it in a way that I had never considered. She said, your fear limits what God can do through your life. I had never looked at fear that way, and that's what my dad, in quoting Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was trying to say, that the reason why we should only fear fear is because fear limits us. Fear puts restrictions on us. Fear puts blocks up where God says, I want to send you places. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of fear that is natural and protective, because certainly that fear exists. If you see a lion, or in this country perhaps a Sasquatch, out in the woods, you would naturally feel afraid and want to run away. That's a good thing. There are certain fears that are protective, but there's a kind of fear, the fear that we most commonly experience, anxiety or phobias, that is limited. The kind of fear that starts to place things in our mind that don't even really exist. For me, it was this plane is going to crash. For other people, it might be that is going to make you sick. For other people, it might be they're all judging you. For someone else, it might be they don't really love me. These fears start to lie to us, but they limit us because we start to believe them. And fear does a couple of things. It limits us, but it also keeps us silent. Because on the one hand, it's saying, this awful thing is going to happen. They're thinking this bad thing about you. You're not good enough for that group. If you do this, you'll get hurt. You'll be made fun of. You'll be persecuted. And then in the next breath, it says, but don't tell anybody you feel this way. They'll all think you're weak if you admit that you're afraid. They'll all think you're a failure if you admit that you're afraid. They'll all think that you're less if you think that you're afraid. And so fear not only limits us, but it silences us. Now, I'm thinking through those stupid childhood fears and kind of wrestling with a different phobia. Ultimately, I had to name that. I had to address it. And I had to accept the fact that a fear ultimately for me of dying always exists in any aspect of life. There's a risk in anything that we do, in walking out your front door and getting in a car. Risk exists. And we accept that in different interactions that we have and in different things that we do. But that if I gave into the risk, it would continue to limit what I'm able to do. And so in confronting that and in addressing that, I've been able to overcome that. And I've been able to really be blessed with a lot of experiences and relationships I wouldn't otherwise have had. This past year I've done, I think, over 100,000 miles worth of flights. Yeah, I've been on planes that have had emergency landings where, emergency crews have come onto the plane and evacuated us off. That was fun. Really bumpy flights, flown through storms, things that normally would have kind of shaken me. But resonating in my mind is always my wife's words. Your fear will limit what God can do through you. And what God wants for you, which is ultimately not to be enslaved to fear, but to be free. And to glorify God with your life and by that freedom. What does this have to do with mercy? It's quite simple. Any act of mercy involves risk. Anytime that we decide to extend mercy, whether it is to another person in forgiving them, whether it is through an act of mercy to another person, whether it's in seeking mercy for ourselves, there is always risk. Because we put ourselves out there. You know, when you extend mercy, you put a piece of yourself out to another person. Take, for example, any of the works of mercy. If we look through the corporal works of mercy, feeding the hungry, of giving clothes to those who need clothes, and sheltering those who have no shelter. When we do those things, we take a risk in putting ourselves out there that we may, in entering into the suffering of another person, bear also their pain and their hardship. If we really extend them mercy. This is different than like a service project thing where we stay detached. To really live in work of mercy is to enter into the experience of another person. It's not just giving somebody bread who's hungry. It's sitting at a table and eating with them. Anybody can stand in a line that serves food and just pour stuff out at a shelter. But fewer people can sit and relate and talk. That's a work of mercy. To really be able to sit and enter in and bear the suffering of another. But it means that we may leave uncomfortable or hurting or even challenged to do something more. And so there's a fear there. I visited a shelter in Chicago with a youth group on an urban immersion trip. We went to a worker house down there and spent a couple of days. And the most uncomfortable moment for me was when we spent an evening serving dinner at a shelter for men who were homeless. Because I wanted to just serve food. I was like, I'll stand behind the line. I didn't want to be at tables with people eating. Because there's risk there, and the fear is that I may see something that makes me uncomfortable. I may see something that challenges my life. And anytime we enter into a relationship, there's fear. What if somebody thinks poorly of me? What if I do the wrong thing? And so fear sometimes prevents us from the uncomfortable reality of works of mercy. It tells us to, just step back, donate the cans of food, that some of which maybe are expired, but it's fine for somebody who needs food to eat. Or go through your closet and give some clothes, and that's enough. But it's not. Those are nice things to do, and they're good things to do, to be sure. But if we really want to live mercy, we have to accept that there's risk. And we have to overcome a fear in that risk. It's the same thing in our own lives as we approach the people who aren't within this room. Sometimes it can be easy, knowing that we may be judged for our faith, to judge back. Or to assume the worst about an individual who isn't within our camp. Or to assume the worst about somebody who persecutes us. We look at Jesus' words in saying, bless those who persecute you, bless and don't curse them. And it almost seems, in our day and age, especially counterintuitive. It feels sometimes like we're at war with the people around us. That those on the other side who look at me don't necessarily believe that I have anybody's best interest in their mind. And so to say, well, bless those who persecute you, extend mercy to those who hate you. This involves serious fear. Because what would it look like to live your faith in a bold way? And what does it look like to live your faith in a way that actually becomes an act of mercy? One of the spiritual works of mercy is to admonish the sinner. And in our day and age, admonishing someone, admonishing the sinner, and being like, hey, just so you know, Scott, you're a sinner. Scott's like, oh man, you don't necessarily do that. What I would challenge you with is, what if you lived your life in such a way, what if you lived mercy in such a way that people couldn't help but feel convicted by that? I had a friend, a very holy friend, much holier than I am, who used to laugh because people would get upset with him for doing nothing. Not doing anything offensive. They just be like, oh, you just make me so mad. Because he lived his life in such a way that it was inherently uncomfortable for those around him. Not because he was offensive, not because he went on, Twitter and went on rants against people, not because he even looked at people and were like, you're a sinner, not because he had a bullhorn and stood on a college campus corner and yelled at people as they walked by, but because the way he lived his life was so merciful, so loving, so giving, that other people were like, guy, I kind of suck. And you have something different. And though people get frustrated with him, ultimately they want to know why. Why do you spend time every morning volunteering? Why do you listen so much? Why is it when I have a conversation with you, you're not distracted? What is it about you that's different? You see, when you live a life of mercy, you start to admonish people, challenge people, just by your very existence. So what does it look like to do that outside of these walls for you? What does it look like to extend mercy to those who have hurt you, or who may have hurt you, or may hurt you? And here's the other thing, as far as extending mercy, and I feel like this is vital to be said, every act of forgiveness is an act of mercy. But it's important to make a distinction here. I want to challenge you to live lives of forgiveness, lives of reconciliation if possible, lives that extend mercy to others, especially those who have wronged us. But there's something very important to distinguish here. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. To reconcile with someone is to bring fully around healing within a relationship. Forgiveness is a movement within reconciliation. Think about it this way. If I break a window, we all break a window. We're out playing an airplane game that now involves throwing baseballs. I don't know. We've just adapted it that way. And we break a retreat center window. We eventually have to atone for that and ask forgiveness for that, and people may forgive us for that. But to truly reconcile things, eventually we probably need to make amends for the window. In relationship, that doesn't mean we can't forgive those persons and extend them mercy. In fact, it's all the more vital that we extend them mercy, even if they don't realize it. But sometimes forgiving isn't forgetting. Sometimes forgiving is remembering so that we don't wind up back in a bad situation. Sometimes forgiving is as much about us being free from the resentment, from the anger, and extending somebody mercy and letting them go. Sometimes extending somebody mercy isn't forgiving them so they can continue in a cycle of abuse or destructive behavior. That friend who's struggling with an addiction, who over and over hurts us and then says, I'll be fine, I'll give it up, I'll stop, and never does. Sometimes extending mercy is breaking the relationship. Because maybe it's in that break that that person finally understands the pain that they're causing. It's not wishing them ill, it's wishing them well, but understanding the context in which we do that. This is a healthy way to live mercy in relationships and in friendships and to live forgiveness. And that's, I think, the next area where we need to be challenged. What does it mean to live forgiveness with one another and to allow yourself to be forgiven? I would petition to this group that perhaps the best thing that we could ever do is when somebody says, hey, I'm sorry, that we say, I forgive you. I mean, do we realize the bondage that we keep somebody in when they say, hey, I'm sorry, I really wronged you, it's okay. Well, it's not okay. If it was okay, there would be no need to seek forgiveness. And so every moment that somebody says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that I did that, and we say, oh, it's okay, it's fine. We never offer them the mercy of forgiveness. And maybe it's not fine, in which case you need to talk through that. But I would encourage us to live lives of forgiveness in that way. All of this, though, comes back to, are you willing to overcome the fear that it takes to live mercifully? It's far easier to go inward and to be within our shell than it is to extend mercy to other people. It just is. Mercy is to suffer with another person. It is to be Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus and to weep with those who weep. It is to be Jesus as he's anointed by the woman who was caught in sin and to look and to say, I forgive you. I extend mercy to you. I no longer judge you for the wrongs that you've done. I look at you as Jesus looks at you, which is new. And ultimately, it's to overcome the fear that exists when seeking out mercy for ourselves and forgiveness from others in the relationships that we have in seeking out mercy and forgiveness from God. We gloss over that line in the Our Father, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. If we want to be able to forgive and extend mercy, we must know how to receive it and to receive it well. And it's that mercy that's been extended to us through this retreat. It's that mercy that allows us to be a gift of ourselves to other people. It's that mercy that allows us to really live the works of mercy in our life, not as service opportunities or service projects, but as encounters and relationships where we meet Christ, where we are Christ to others, but also where we allow others to be Christ to us. Ultimately, this becomes evangelistic. That's what Pope Francis, I believe, has called this next year to be a year of mercy. A church that's really recognizes we're a hospital for sinners, we're a training ground for saints. And we're going to pull people in and display who we are by our mercy is to proclaim the gospel. Is to take what you've been given in mercy and to bring it to others. To say, as I've been forgiven and set free, I want you to experience that healing. But we have to be about it first. The church is filled with plenty of judgmental, mean people. Most of them exist online, on comment boxes, on any number of Catholic blogs, anywhere. That's not the kind of church that people are going to want to join. A church that continually fights within itself and then fights with people outside. To live a life marked by mercy, by forgiveness, by reconciliation, is to proclaim the gospel because it's what we've been given in the gospel. Freedom. Peace. I encourage you to think through these things today and to say, where in my life do I need to begin offering mercy? Where do I need to forgive others in order to really allow God to forgive me? If we hold resentment, it's always going to weigh on us, and we're going to ask questions. Well, could God really forgive the things that I've done? Where do I need to forgive others? And remember, knowing that forgiving isn't always saying, oh, let's get back into that friendship, into that relationship, into that situation again. I know people who have said, I have to forgive my dad, but I'll never be able to let him know that because he walked out so long ago, I don't even know where he is. Or people who have said, I need to forgive that person who abused me, but that doesn't mean that what they did was right, and it doesn't mean that what they did was okay, and it doesn't mean that it didn't hurt me deeply, but it does mean that I can no longer let that define me. So are there areas in your life where you need to do that? And sometimes that's a process. Are there places where you're being called to live works of mercy? Are there people in your life that you do need to call out for their behavior? Are there people in your life that you need to convict by your actions, by living your faith in a way that's bold? Are there areas where you felt a tug on your heart to serve a certain population of people or a certain group, and fear is holding you back? We need to identify these things because it's only when we identify them that you can go to the next question of what fear is preventing you from doing it now. Because if there is no fear, maybe you're doing all of these things now, and that's great. But if you're not, then something's holding you back, and my thought is that it probably is fear. And that fear will limit what God is able to do in your life, and what God is able to work in your life through the mercy that you've been given. Whatever fear you have, I can't go serve those people. I don't know how. I can't forgive that person. It's just going to be too painful to deal with that. I don't know how to let myself be forgiven. I don't know how to let myself off the hook for the times I've screwed up and let myself down. In identifying those areas, the next thing you need to identify is what fear is preventing me from really living into those things. And it's that thought and that question that I would kind of leave you with as we begin to wind down our day. I believe that by receiving mercy from God and really living that mercy, we have an opportunity to change the world that so desperately needs people to suffer with them. In a world that's disconnected and broken, in a world where so many people are tied into something as cold and impersonal as a phone, in a world where most of us exist as Twitter handles and Instagram accounts, to have a real relationship, to connect with another person one-on-one, to bear the sufferings of another, this is something radical. This is something life-changing. At the very first night, last night, I heard a couple people overheard talking as I was prepping about different people they knew who, when they talked to them, like they really talked. That person like talked back. You ever had a moment of just connection where like you're talking to somebody, they're just totally into what you're saying, not their phone or they're kind of looking over your shoulder, they're trying to find the next person in the room, but a person who like you sit down and you talk with them and they're just really there. Those moments of connectivity and compassion and mercy are what we need. This is the key to revival and renewal. We can put on great programs, we can have wonderful events, we can have the most beautiful liturgies, and all of it will still seem empty. Sometimes literally empty because nobody may be there if we don't first go out and extend mercy. The moment of walking with another person, and we're not able to do that if we don't first extend it to ourselves, if we don't first identify what is holding us back and what fear prevents it. And so we'll take a few minutes just to reflect on that. I want you to take some time to journal, to reflect before you get into your small groups, and just to look at that, to say, where am I being called to show mercy in my life? And what fears maybe are holding me back? What fears are holding me back from showing that kind of mercy? Is it a fear of rejection? Is it a fear that you haven't received mercy yourself? Mercy is a gift that's been freely given to us. Nothing you can do earns it. Nothing you can do will destroy it. It just exists. It's there as a gift. We choose whether or not to receive it. We also choose whether or not to give it to others. So take some time. Take a few minutes. You can spread out in here. We're going to join back with your small groups at about 11:40, 11:45-ish. So do take some time to jot some notes. And then I would encourage you to bring those things with you to, when I say 11:45, I'm clearly looking at my iPad, which is in Phoenix time. So what I mean is 2:40 to 2:45. That's what time I would encourage you to be back. And to bring some of this stuff into your final small groups and to be honest and sharing what holds you back. What fears prevent you from showing mercy? Where do you need to show mercy? And to hold one another accountable to those things so that you can go and live that boldly in your own lives. We'll pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, you've given us such a great gift of your mercy and your love. Reveal to us the areas where we are afraid and where it holds us back from walking with others, from suffering with others, from being with others. Our fear prevents us from you fully living in us and glorifying yourself through us. Make known to us any people or groups that we need to be your mercy towards, that we need to suffer alongside or suffer with. People we've neglected or looked over, or stirrings in our heart that we just do. Bless our time of discussion, Lord. May all of our words, all of our discussions point towards you and continue to unwrap the message you're speaking to us this week. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.